Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. You're watching the In Deep on the Delta Weekly Fishing Report, and this is the report for June 8th. I want to start off by once again reminding everybody about the Toxic Day celebration. Well, it's not a celebration, it's a get-together out at Russo's, June 24th. All the custom bait makers, all the big custom bait makers from the western United States are going to be there. Come on out, you'll get to talk to the bait makers, ask them questions, you'll be able to buy custom baits. That's Toxic Day, June 24th out at Russo's. What else we got going? I want to give a shout out and a congratulations to Jax and Nate from the Delta Saints Bass team. They recently won the state championship on the Delta. Last week they won the BBT, the youth division of the BBT tournament. So two big wins in a row. And what I want to do is obviously give them a congratulations, but Jax and Nate from the Delta Saints team, Sacramento, Clarksburg, and Ian and Mateo from the San Joaquin Bassmasters down in Manteca. They will be representing California at the high school national championships in Wisconsin on the Mississippi River. It's coming up in about 3 weeks. Both of these teams are looking for people that can support them financially. So if you have the means to do that and you want to make a donation to either the San Joaquin Bassmasters or the Delta Saints Club, check them out on Instagram. If you can't get a hold of them, give me a call. I'll make sure that I put you in touch with them, and you can maybe help them out financially to get these kids up there and help them represent not only California, but they are local Delta teams. So good job, all four of you guys, and we're going to all be rooting for you. Last week was a much tougher week when it comes to stripers, and let's face it, just like the bass, stripers have had a tough go of it. Jeff Suhu was out for his last trip of the year last weekend, and he, the last 3 or 4 weeks, he's just been killing it out there. This week was a little slower. Also talked to Alan Fong. Alan has not been striper fishing. He's been concentrating on largemouth, but he talks to a lot of people, and his reports have been that the striper fishing has been pretty slow. Now, I was out at Vieira's, I think it was last Monday, well, maybe it was last Friday. They're reporting that everybody out there has been pretty happy. The trollers that have been up and down the Sacramento River have actually been doing pretty well. I've seen the population of sea lions decrease in the last week to 10 days. I talked to Jeff Suhu and I also talked to Alan, and they said both said the same thing. They've seen fewer and fewer sea lions. So that's telling you that their food source is no longer in the Delta. Maybe they're moving back out to the bay. And the bottom line is, like I said, it's been a tough season for most guys. I know the bait chuckers, the guys that are throwing swim baits and things that usually do really well on the Delta and catch a lot of big fish, they've had a really tough time. The guys fishing bait and trolling have been doing a little better. But both Alan and Jeff think that the fish that are in the bay, and they are clogged up in the bay, they're in Honker Bay, they're in Sassoon Bay. My son Nate fishes in the Napa River, and the Napa River's full of fish. The people in the know are doubting that those fish are going to come into the river this summer. It's going to be fall when they come into spawn. Let's just call it like it is. This last striper season, the spring season was just kind of a dud. Right now there's not a whole lot of people that are fishing for them, and I'm not getting a lot of reports, but a lot of the bass guys, they are still catching fish, stripers when they're fishing for bass, mostly on jerk baits, but every now and then guys are getting them on crank baits and chatter baits and every conceivable bait that you can think of, but they're just not in there in the numbers and the areas. They're not grouped up enough to just go out and really target them. So that's the stripers. Let's get into the largemouth bass. There's been an increase in the largemouth bass fishing catch. I will say that the BBT tournament last weekend had about 70 anglers, 16 pounds, 16 and a half pounds won the BBT tournament. 70 anglers. The midsection of anglers, were picking up anywhere from about 8 to 10, 11 pounds. That was a tough tournament. I talked to Steve who is the director for the Lunkers Tuesday night tournament. And I think 14 pounds won that tournament. It was either 14 or 16 pounds again. But again, they only had 12 boats out. And I think it was 16 pounds because they had a couple of 16-pound bags. Not great, but, you know, 16 pounds for a half-day tournament isn't bad. A full-day tournament that the BBT had on Saturday, that's a tough weight, a tough winning weight. With that being said, all of the reports that I've been getting, everyone is been a little more happy. It's not broken wide open, but everybody's catching fish. There's a lot of small fish in the mix, but there are some bigger fish coming in, into the bags. Let's talk about spawning, and maybe the spawn has a little bit to do with how the fishing's been. Number one, I talked to my partner, Coach Ted. Ted lives out on the Calaveras River, and he's telling me that he's never seen so many fry in the Calaveras River in the last 13 years. I've talked to several people that are saying all over the Delta there is fry. So we know there's been some spawning that has taken place. We also know from my experience, the people that I'm talking to, Rob Cloutier, I'm talking to, you know, numerous people at the dock, numerous people on the water. I'm talking to Alan Fong, and Alan's been catching a lot of fish. And we're examining these fish, and we're getting some nice fish in the 5 and 6 pound range. Some of us have been getting 7 pounders, not me, but I think Alan's got some fish up to 7 pounds. And Alan knows fish. These fish are not spawned out. They're big, heavy fish with big bellies, full of eggs, and they will be spawning. This is a good thing. Rob Cloutier is saying the same thing, and on the fish that I'm catching, they're just pretty fish, big bellies, and they're, you know, they're not digging beds yet, but they are ripe to spawn, and I think we're going to have more spawning coming up. Now, here's one situation that's happened in the last week to 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. The topwater bite is starting to materialize, but there's been a lot of guys, especially with frogs, throwing frogs in shallower water, that are getting bit, but they're not hooking up. That's been my experience also, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. I have been catching fish, but my fish in the last week have been out in open water with treble hook baits, such as walking baits like the River to Sea Bubble Walker. Those fish are coming up and cracking it. I think what's happening, and I see this happen year after year, and it's a precursor to what's going to happen in the next few days. The bigger females that have already spawned, the fry that we're seeing, these females are just getting ready to start feeding and start attacking baits. When they do that, they're generally not super aggressive. They're not, you know, into the feeding mood. They're kind of slapping at baits more than eating them. That goes for about a week. Once those females start feeling good and they actually start getting hungry and they want to eat, you know, I'll just say last week I had one day where I think I had 5 or 6 frog bites and I didn't catch one fish. I think this week, when these fish recover, I get 5 or 6 frog bites, I'm probably going to catch 5 or 6 fish because they're going to be coming up and eating them. So remember that the topwater bite's going to be coming on, I'm pretty darn sure. Another kind of indicator of the fish getting more and more active, this week a lot of people catching them on worms and pitching creature baits and things like that, but there's also a lot of people catching them on chatterbaits and crankbaits. The fish are starting to move. They're starting to get more and more aggressive. I did listen to all the winners from the BBT tournament. The top 3 teams, they all relied heavily on worms. So if you're going out next week, I would definitely have worms and chatterbaits and throwing them into the deep tulies. But there's also a bite happening on in the troughs on brick-brack banks, rock, and points where we have more current. So the fish are getting more active. They're not in a great bite, but it's starting to happen. Let me tell you what I did last, I think it was Friday. I went out on an all-night trip. And, well, I'll tell you what, let's do the first In Deep on the Delta After Dark report, and I'll tell you what I did last Friday night. It's Friday. I'm out on the full moon. I thought I'd come out here. I've got 70-degree water temps. I'm fishing flooded islands, and it just hasn't happened for me yet. Tonight, I threw whopper ploppers, I threw wake baits, I threw walking baits, and I threw Oh boy, I threw frogs. The only thing I could get bit on was a frog. I had, I'd say 5 or 6 bites on frogs, and I had a couple really good blowups. They just weren't committing. I didn't hook up with one fish. For you guys that are thinking about doing a nighttime trip, I would say let's wait till the next full moon in July. Hey, that's the in deep, the first in deep on the Delta after dark report. Let's get back to the in deep on the Delta daytime report. Okay, with that being said, I didn't do very well, but what I didn't mention is as I went out there on Friday afternoon, I fished Friday evening to Saturday morning. Didn't do very well in the afternoon. I fished till about 11 o'clock. At that time, I found out my sleeping bag and pillow and mat had gotten wet. I don't know how they got wet. I do know how they got wet, but I'm embarrassed to tell you. So I spent the night out at Liberty Island in my rain gear, in my soggy sleeping bag with my soggy pillow. It wasn't a pleasant scene, I'll tell you. And whoever it was, the guy that said, you know, the worst day of fishing is better than the best day at work, I'd like to get a hold of that guy, because it ain't true. But anyhow, that's my problem. And bottom line is that was a tough day and a tough night for me. Since then, I have rebounded. Last week I told you I wasn't catching any fish on chatterbaits. As soon as I finished that report, I went out and did a little fishing. I think I caught 5 fish on a chatterbait. First time I've done that in a short period of time all year. So started picking fish up on chatterbaits. I have not been throwing crankbaits. I'm still doing very well with worms and creature baits, throwing them deep in the tulies. And I'll tell you, I was out Tuesday. For all of you guys that were out Tuesday, that was the day it rained a little bit, overcast, kind of cloudy, just balmy. That was the day you wanted to be on the Delta. I did really well. I had several people that sent in reports. Man, we did great. They were all out on Tuesday. Talked to Rob Cloutier. Called him up after I got in. He had just gotten out. How's it going, Rob? Man, they're killing it. So Tuesday was just one of those days. Again, if we get rain, overcast, warm weather, balmy weather, you want to be on the Delta. Since then, I think you can, pretty much see that the particular day has a lot to do with how the fishing is. What we're looking for is hopefully for the water temperatures to be in that mid 70s, and we're looking for about a 5 to 8 mile an hour wind. If you have that on the Delta, we're probably going to have a good chance of catching some pretty good fish. Okay, with that, if you're coming out next week, make sure you have a lot of junk on your deck. You want a chatterbait, you want to have a jerkbait, and probably a crankbait. And if you got a lot of rods on your deck, I would even put a fluke. You definitely want to have a couple of different worms. You want to have some creature baits. You want to be pitching at high tide, especially on the high outgo tide. You want to be pitching deep into the tulies. As that tide comes out, you can start looking for beds. If you don't find beds, if you like fishing rock walls and troughs, go over there. Outside the troughs, you're going to fish chatterbaits and crankbaits, jerkbaits. Inside, you can still throw worms and drop shot. You guys should do pretty well. Fishing is getting better and better. Make sure you send me reports. And once again, guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Tell your friends if they're not watching, have them watch and have them send me some reports. So thanks for watching, and until next week, we will see you on the water.